And I was no different than any other parent. When my son came home and he told me he got a job at Dairy Queen, I asked him the three questions that any typical parent would ask. I asked him if he got a uniform. I asked him how much he was getting paid, and I asked him if I had to pick him up after work. The three typical parents things that any parent would ask. I never once stopped to ask him if he thought about what he would do if he was asked to do something that he didn't understand, or if he was asked to do something that he thought perhaps was unsafe. If he knew that he had the right to politely step back and just say, look, I'm not sure about this, can you tell me a little bit more about this? Never even crossed my mind to do that. Well, they put him on with an electrician, and his job was to kind of be the eyes and ears for this electrician while he was doing his work, and the electrician told him to get lost, that he didn't need him. And my son claims that he heard my voice in the back of his head saying, don't do anything stupid, Nigel. And just instead of getting lost and going and having a smoke or whatever you do when you get lost, he just walked around the corner and just stood there and listened. He said it wasn't 30 seconds later till he heard tools falling, till he heard grunting and groaning. And to those of you that know what happens in the tunnel, it was a big boring machine called Big Becky. Biggest boring machine in the world, bigger than the one that did the English, the channel. And what it did is it just ground its way through the rock, and as the rock fell off, it went into hoppers. The hoppers went on conveyor belts. The conveyor belts were shrouded so the rock wouldn't fall out, and the rock went out the end of the tunnel. If the tunnel was in 6 kilometers, the conveyor belt was 6 kilometers. It went up about 125 feet in the air, went over the Niagara River, and dropped the rock into the middle of on the island in the middle of the river. Well, this grunting and groaning that my son had heard, and these tools clanging and clashing, was the electrician had fallen into the hopper. He'd gone through the hopper and he was on the conveyor belt. The conveyor belt was taking him out for a 6-kilometer ride out the end of the tunnel to take him up 125 feet in the air and to drop him onto the island from that height. Nobody knew he was on that conveyor belt except for him, and I don't know what state he was in, and my son. So my son came out when he heard that, he pulled the cord, and they went in, they got the man. He was injured very badly. They fired him. They gave my son a $75 gift certificate to Best Buy for doing this, but it did have a happy ending.
Welcome to Youth at Work. My name is Saima, and today we're really excited to welcome the Ontario Minister of Labour, Kevin Flynn. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
What are some of the things that you're introducing today?
Well, because of the time of the year it is, Seema, what we're asking is that people pay a little bit more attention to young people that are entering the workforce. And that could be the young people themselves, it could be employers that are hiring young people, it could be the families of the young people themselves, because often what happens is when people either start that first job or they start a summer job, they think about how much money they're going to make, they think about the friends they're going to make, they think about how they're going to spend the money. They think how they're going to save the money for school. What they often don't think about is health and safety on the job, and they don't realize that some of the jobs they're doing may put them in unsafe situations. And what we don't want to see is we don't want to see anybody getting hurt on the job. Each year in the province of Ontario, about 17 young people get hurt each and every day to the point where they can't go to work the next day. We think we can do better than that, and one way of doing that is to ask people to start thinking about it more. So we're doing that in a number of ways. We've got a video contest where we've asked young people to tell us what they think we should be doing. We've got our own initiatives. We do blitzes. We go out into areas of the economy where young people are working in the retail sector, in the construction sector, that type of thing. Anywhere where a young person might have a summer job. And we pay particular attention to make sure that young people know their rights, that they've got the right to refuse unsafe work. And that doesn't have to be an aggressive thing. It can be very politely stepping back and saying to your boss or to your supervisor, I'm not sure about that. Can you tell me a little bit more about that before I do it? And people have the right to be paid at least minimum wage in the province of Ontario, vacation pay, time off for breaks. All the things that go along with the way we treat each other as employer and employee in the province of Ontario, we need to make sure that young people understand that.
And do you find that young people are more susceptible to injury or anything like that than older people?
Oddly enough, we do, and you would think it would be the other way around. It's
Yeah.
kind of counterintuitive. You think as we got older and we were doing jobs that required more skill and experience, that we'd find ourselves in more hazardous situations. But see, it's exactly the opposite. What happens is the time we're most vulnerable in our working life to a workplace injury or death is in the very first few weeks of the very first job we have. So it's something that people don't understand that. I think more people need to understand that, because you can only imagine the impact that a workplace fatality or a workplace injury has on the family, on the brothers and the sisters and the mothers and the fathers, and it goes well beyond the day that the injury happens. This often changes families for the rest of their lives. So, and often it's just that 10 seconds you want back. It's taking a shortcut you shouldn't have taken, it's not following the rules, it's horsing around maybe in a very, in a place where you should be paying more attention. Just leads to those tragic circumstances. We can do better than that.
We wanted to ask you, what was your first job, and were there any memorable lessons that it taught you?
Where I probably got my first real introduction to safety was, for a number of years I worked for Shell Canada. And Shell is a very safety conscious company. They really take safety, they really take it seriously. In fact, you train as much as you work. So you're training to do the jobs safely, you train in firefighting, you train in all sorts of things. You'll notice I'm not wearing any rings, and it's often the lessons you get in your younger life. And that is, they showed me a picture of a man who got his ring caught in a piece of machinery where he shouldn't have been wearing a ring, and it actually pulled his finger off, and there was a picture of his finger with a ring on it and a tendon that would have gone all the way up to here. And it's an image that just got branded in my brain, and now I'll wear my rings when I'm out. I'm very happily married for 40 years, and I'll wear my rings out to dinner or something like that, but when I'm just doing ordinary things during the day, I always take my rings off. And just an incident where something caught my attention, and it's often not those big, long, preachy speeches that people give you that you learn something from. It's often those little tidbits, those little conversations you might have with your mom or your dad or with an older brother that's been working already. They're the things that stick in your mind, I think.
So you've built a career in government, and we were wondering if for young people you had any advice.
What I'm seeing is the world picks up, and as technology changes and the pace of change quickens, I think there's a huge appetite for the way that young people think, for the way that young people approach politics or approach problems in life, that I think is underappreciated by the young people themselves. So I'd really encourage, and especially young women, that's one thing we're definitely short of in politics, is young women. I definitely would encourage young people to think about a career in politics, but that doesn't mean you've got to run out and take a political science degree. At one time, the House of Commons in Ottawa, for example, was populated by, I think a majority of the members were lawyers, and people didn't like that. As much as we like lawyers and we need lawyers, what they want to do is be represented by people who are teachers, who are social workers, who work in TV studios, who drive buses, and they want to have a variety of people that are representing their interests in government. So the idea really is to get through your post-secondary, I think, and then start to think of a career, but you bring the skills that you've got in your education and your work life into that role.
Thank you for coming in today. And my name is Saima, and this was Youth at Work.